A giant cowboy rescued an 18-year-old girl from slavers, and the tribe called him hero. The sun was just rising over the red hills when the giant cowboy found the cage. It sat on a wagon half sunk in mud, 2 horses dead in their traces, and 3 men sprawled around a dying fire. The wind had wiped their tracks clean, but the smell of whiskey and gunpowder still lingered. His name was Barrett Cole, 6'6" of scarred quiet, a man who'd once hauled timber for half the frontier and never thought he'd haul a soul. He moved slow, careful, until the sound reached him. A weak cry, half human, half hope. Inside the iron bars crouched a girl, no older than 18, wrapped in torn calico and raw fear. Her wrists were chained, her lips split from thirst, but her eyes still burned, clear as creek water. Barrett knelt, his shadow swallowing the cage. "They hurt you?" he asked, voice deep as the ground. She shook her head once, too proud for truth. He looked at the dead men. 2 bullets each, clean shots. Someone else had done the killing. Maybe the girl herself. "You got a name?" he asked. "Naya," she whispered. The Apache lilt soft but steady. "They took me from my mother's camp 3 nights ago." Barrett drew his knife and pried at the lock until it snapped with a sound that made her flinch. "Ain't nobody taking you anywhere now," he said. When he lifted her from the cage, she was light as smoke. The sky behind them turned gold, and the wind carried the sound of hooves, distant, fast, too many for peace. Barrett scanned the ridge and saw riders cresting, dust rising in clean sunlight. "You know 'em?" he asked. "Slavers," she said. "The ones who sold me." Barrett's jaw tightened. He set her behind a fallen log and checked his rifle. "Then we end their business right here." The first shot came before the words finished leaving his mouth. He fired back once, then twice, and by the time the echo died, only the sound of her heartbeat filled the air. When it was over, the riders were gone. The wagon smoldered, and Barrett stood breathing hard, rifle still warm. He looked down at Naya, who stared at him not with fear, but with something like belief. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Safe don't last," she answered. "But thank you for this minute." The wind shifted, clean and clear, and for the first time in years, Barrett felt he'd done something that might outlive him. Barrett rode north with Naya cradled in front of him, the morning sun already burning hot across the valley floor, turning the earth gold and alive. She hadn't spoken since they left the wrecked wagon, but every so often her fingers gripped the saddle horn tighter, as if holding on to the last thread of courage she had left. Barrett glanced down, noticing how her bare feet were scraped raw and her wrists bruised from the chains. He tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped her wrists with quiet care, saying nothing because kindness, when spoken, could sometimes sound too much like pity. The trail led toward the high mesas, where he knew an abandoned way station stood, just walls and a roof, but better than open sky. As they rode, Naya's voice broke the silence. "Why'd you stop for me?" she asked, eyes fixed on the horizon. Barrett thought for a while before answering. "'Cause I know what it feels like to be sold and not worth a coin." She turned to him, confusion flickering. "You were a slave?" "Not to men," he said. "To my own mistakes." The wind carried their silence after that, and when the way station came into view, a half-collapsed barn beside a rusted water trough, Naya exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Barrett helped her down, handed her a canteen, and began to gather wood for a small fire. When he returned, she was sitting against the wall, the canteen empty, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You should sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." She looked up at him, half smiling through the grime. You talk like the old stories, like a man who already died once. Maybe I did, he said. Just never got buried proper. She closed her eyes, and within minutes her breathing slowed, steady and deep. Barrett sat by the fire, staring at the horizon where the wind kept stirring the grass in long, shimmering waves. He thought about the men he'd killed, about the girl who'd lived, and about the world that could trade innocence for silver and still call itself civilized. When the first shadow moved against the sunlight, he was already reaching for his rifle. 3 riders were cresting the ridge, not slavers this time, but men painted in red and white, riding like the earth itself was theirs. Barrett didn't move. He just muttered, "Guess we're about to see who she really belongs to." The 3 riders slowed as they approached the ruined way station, their horses gliding through the tall grass like shadows across firelight. Barrett stood tall beside the doorway, rifle resting easy in his hand but barrel down. The kind of stance that said he'd fight if he had to, but didn't want to. The lead rider dismounted first. A man in his 50s with eagle feathers braided into his long black hair, his face marked with calm authority rather than rage. Naya stirred from sleep and froze when she saw him. "Tahan," she whispered, her voice trembling with both relief and guilt. The older man's eyes softened when they met hers, but then hardened again when they found Barrett. "She is my daughter," he said in accented English, his tone low and steady like a drum beat that could shake mountains. Barrett didn't answer right away. He nodded once, slow. "She's lucky then. World don't give back what it takes too often." Tahan's gaze dropped to the rifle, then the wagon scars on Barrett's arms. "You killed the men who took her?" "I did." "Then you have done what her tribe could not," Tahan said, "and that is a debt not easily forgotten." Behind him, the younger warriors dismounted, their eyes narrow with suspicion. One of them muttered in Comanche, and Naya translated softly, "He says you'll want payment for me." Barrett gave a small shake of his head. "Don't need payment," he said, "just water for the trail." The chief studied him for a long, quiet moment. "You are a giant, Barrett Cole," he said finally, pronouncing the name with strange reverence. "But you stand like a man, still waiting to fall." Barrett almost smiled. "Ain't wrong." The warriors brought water and food, their caution slowly melting under Tahan's gaze. Naya knelt by her father, speaking softly, her words a blend of apology and pride. Barrett watched her eyes. How they shone when she mentioned his name, how Tahan's expression changed from stern to thoughtful. When she finished, Tahan rose. "You will ride with us," he said. "There are debts to settle and truths to speak before the sun sets." Barrett hesitated, looking at the burned sky, then at Naya. "If I ride as myself," he said, "not as your prisoner." Tahan nodded. "Then ride as a man whose hands have already proven their worth." The giant cowboy saddled his horse, the girl mounted beside him, and together they rode toward the painted hills, where peace and danger waited side by side. By noon, they reached the Comanche camp stretched across the river valley like a living tapestry of hides, horses, and smoke. The air smelled of sage and roasted corn, the hum of life pulsing beneath the quiet rhythm of distant drums. Barrett dismounted slowly, feeling 100 eyes on him, some curious, most cautious. Naya slid down from her horse and stood beside her father, her face lifted with pride, though her hands still trembled. Tahan raised his palm, and the camp fell silent. "This man," he announced, "brought back what the world tried to steal. He killed the slavers who defiled our land and saved my blood." The murmur that followed wasn't approval yet, just the sound of hearts deciding what to believe. Barrett met their eyes one by one, unflinching. "Didn't save her for thanks," he said. "Just didn't see the sense in letting evil live." The chief's second in command, a narrow-eyed warrior named Loma, stepped forward. "Maybe he's a killer like the others," he said. "Maybe he took her for himself." Barrett's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Naya spoke. "He never touched me, never asked for food or favor. He gave me water when I was dying." Her voice carried like a wind over dry grass. Fragile, steady, impossible to ignore. The murmurs softened. Barrett looked away, uncomfortable with gratitude. Tahan approached and laid a hand on his arm. "You will stay here tonight," he said, "under my protection." Barrett hesitated but nodded. That evening, the campfire glow painted everything gold and alive, and though the people kept their distance, children crept closer to stare at the enormous man who spoke little and carved wooden figures from spare cedar. Naya sat nearby, watching him in silence, her hands folded around the blanket he had given her. "You should rest," Barrett said quietly. "Tomorrow, I ride at dawn." "Where will you go?" she asked. "Back to nowhere," he said. "That's where I came from." She frowned. "You saved me. That means you belong somewhere now." Before he could reply, Loma's voice cut through the night. "Chief Tahan," he called from the edge of camp. "Smoke on the horizon, white men, 20 or more." The drums went still. Barrett stood, his shadow towering over the fire. "They came for the girl again," he said, his tone low as thunder. "But they'll have to go through a camp that ain't afraid anymore." At first light, the valley looked almost peaceful. The river gleaming like polished silver, the grass bending gently under a warm wind. But Barrett knew better. He stood on the ridge beside Tahan, watching the faint plume of dust rise from the southern flats, a sure sign that trouble was coming. "They ride fast," Tahan said quietly, his eyes narrowing. "Merchants of flesh, maybe soldiers too." Barrett shifted his rifle on his shoulder. "Slavers don't like losing their property. They'll come back meaner." Below them, the camp moved with practiced precision. Women gathered children, warriors checked their weapons, elders prepared the ceremonial fires that would guard the camp's spirit. Naya stood near the horses, her hair braided with a single white feather, face streaked with the red clay of protection. "You don't have to fight," Barrett told her when he approached. "This ain't your burden." "They took my voice once," she said. "If they come again, they'll hear it." Her words carried a strength that startled him. She wasn't the frightened girl from the cage anymore. Tahan gave orders in Comanche, and soon riders were dispersing across the ridges, bows and rifles glinting under the morning sun. Barrett moved among them, fixing broken reins, loading spare rounds, his size alone enough to calm the anxious. Loma approached, frowning. "You fight with us, white man?" "I fight beside anyone with a right cause," Barrett said. "And right now, yours is cleaner than most." The younger warrior nodded grudgingly. When the dust plume grew into a dark line of riders, the camp went silent except for the steady beat of one drum. Slow, deep, unbroken. The sound echoed through Barrett's chest like a heartbeat. As the first shots cracked across the plain, he didn't flinch. He took position at the outer wall of wagons, sighting his rifle calmly, each shot finding its mark. Naya moved among the wounded, tearing strips of cloth to bind arms, her face set with quiet fury. For every man who fell, another stood in his place. The slavers' charge faltered, then scattered under a hail of arrows and bullets. When the last of them retreated into the haze, the silence that followed felt sacred. Barrett wiped the sweat from his brow, the rifle still warm. "You said peace would come when blood stopped answering blood," he told Tahan. "Looks like that day ain't here yet." The chief looked toward the horizon where the smoke still hung. "No," he said softly. "But today, it learned our names." Night came heavy over the camp, thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Barrett sat by the dying fire, wrapping a strip of cloth around a bleeding gash on his arm. The fight had been short but brutal, and the silence afterward felt heavier than the noise of battle. Naya knelt beside him with a bowl of clean water, her fingers trembling as she reached for his arm. "You shouldn't do that alone," she said. "I've had worse," Barrett muttered, though his jaw tightened as the cloth soaked red. She dipped a rag, wringing it gently, and pressed it against his skin. He winced, but didn't pull away. Her touch was steady now, not the trembling of fear, but the strength of someone who refused to break again. "They'll come back," she whispered. "The men who ran." Barrett nodded. "Maybe. But next time, they'll know this camp don't scare easy." Across the fire, Chief Tahan watched quietly, his face unreadable in the shifting glow. "You bled for my people today," he said finally. "That makes you kin." Barrett shook his head. "Ain't no kin of mine left, Chief. I just don't like bullies." Tahan smiled faintly. "Then maybe you belong among those who stand against them." He motioned for Naya to follow and left the fire's edge. Barrett leaned back against a log, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, she had returned, with an old beaded necklace in her hands. "This was my brother's," she said softly. "He died protecting me. My father says I must give it to someone who carries the same spirit." She placed it around Barrett's neck before he could protest. The beads were warm from her touch, the weight small but heavy with meaning. "I can't take this," he said. "You already have," she replied, her gaze meeting his. The fire cracked, sending a burst of sparks skyward, and for a heartbeat the world went silent except for the low wind. He saw something in her eyes, gratitude, sorrow, maybe something deeper. But neither spoke again. As she walked away, Barrett stared into the flames until they dimmed. For the first time in years, he felt something that scared him more than any fight. He felt seen. From the shadows, Tahan's voice carried softly through the camp. "The tribe will hold council at dawn. There are decisions to make, about peace, about men who do not belong, and those who do." Barrett didn't move. He only whispered, "Reckon we'll find out which I am." When morning came, mist clung to the valley floor like smoke refusing to rise. The Comanche Council gathered in a wide circle around the sacred fire, their faces painted with earth and ash, their eyes steady on the man who had stood between them and death. Barrett sat a few paces away, hat in his hands, shoulders straight but weary. Naya stood behind her father, her expression calm though her heart pounded loud enough for him to feel it. Chief Tahan spoke first, his voice clear in the still air. "This man, Barrett Cole, came to our land as a stranger. He fought beside us, saved my daughter, and shed his blood for our people. The spirits say a man's worth is measured not by his skin, but by his deeds." Murmurs rippled through the circle, some approving, others doubtful. Loma rose, his eyes sharp. "A good deed doesn't wash away a lifetime of harm," he said. "His kind has taken land, water, brothers. How long before he takes again?" Barrett looked up slowly. "You're not wrong," he said. "Men like me have done worse than I can ever fix. But not all debts get paid in coin. Some get paid in blood and time." His voice carried quiet conviction, not pride. If you think I'll turn on you, I won't argue. But know this. When the next storm comes, I'll be standing on your side of it." The fire popped, the sound like an unseen judge giving its verdict. Tahan nodded once, then turned to Loma. "Words of truth weigh more than fear," he said, "and courage more than bloodlines." He raised his hand to the crowd. "By my word and by the spirits, this man is welcome here until he chooses to leave." A few warriors nodded. Others turned away. But the choice was made. Naya stepped forward, offering Barrett a carved wooden token marked with her tribe's symbol. "Then he belongs," she said softly. Barrett met her eyes, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. Respect, maybe more. The council dispersed slowly, the sun breaking through the mist in long golden streaks. Children ran past him, laughter echoing where there had been fear only yesterday. For the first time since he could remember, Barrett didn't feel like he was passing through life. He felt rooted, even if just for a day. Tahan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Peace," he said quietly, "is never found. It's made by men who've known war." Barrett nodded. "Guess I'll start making some then." That night, the air turned cold, and the stars over the Comanche camp shimmered like 1,000 watching eyes. Barrett couldn't sleep. He sat by the horses, oiling his rifle more out of habit than need, his mind turning over the chief's words. Across the camp, he saw Naya by the river, kneeling where the waters shimmered silver under the moon. He walked closer, slow and quiet, until she spoke without turning. "I used to come here with my brother," she said. "He said the river carries every promise we make to the sky." Barrett stopped beside her. "And what promise are you making tonight?" She looked up at him, the reflection of firelight dancing in her eyes. "That I'll never run again," she said. "Not from men, not from pain, not from love." Her words hit him deeper than he wanted to admit. He crouched, dipping a hand in the cold water. "I made a promise once, too," he said, "that I'd never fight for anyone again. I broke it today." She smiled faintly. Then maybe that promise was meant to be broken. The sound of hoofbeats shattered the quiet. Tahan and 2 warriors emerged from the shadows, faces tense. "Scouts returned," the chief said. "The slavers are gathering again beyond the ridge, more men this time, maybe 30. Barrett rose at once. "Then they'll come before sunrise." "We'll meet them halfway," Tahan replied. "But there's more. They sent word through a captured boy. They want the girl." Naya stood. "They'll have to take me from the ground," she said, her voice steady. Barrett looked at Tahan. "We fight at the ridge, then. I'll take the left flank." The chief studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. "If we fall tomorrow, we fall as brothers." Barrett grasped it firmly. "Ain't planning to fall, Chief." As the camp prepared through the night, Barrett moved among the warriors, teaching them how to reload faster, how to hold ground behind the wagons. The flicker of the fires painted his face in gold and shadow. Naya watched him silently, knowing that every man who fought beside him would live or die by the strength of his arms. When dawn's first light brushed the horizon, Barrett looked toward the rising sun and whispered something only the river could hear. "If I don't come back," he said, "remember I kept my word." Behind him, Naya answered softly, "Then I'll keep mine too." The dawn came red and fierce, bleeding over the hills like the world itself was warning them. Barrett stood beside Tahan at the crest of the ridge, scanning the valley below where the slavers gathered, a swarm of riders, their rifles glinting like teeth in the first light. Behind him, The Comanche warriors formed a silent line, bows drawn, rifles loaded, every face set with quiet resolve. Naya rode up beside him, her small hands gripping the reins, her horse trembling under the weight of what was coming. "You shouldn't be here," Barrett said. "You told me to stop running," she replied, her tone calm. He gave her a long look, then nodded once. "Then stay behind me." The chief raised his spear high, and with a cry that split the morning, the Comanche thundered down the slope. Barrett spurred his horse after them, the ground shaking beneath the hooves. Gunfire cracked, smoke billowed, and the air filled with the chaos of battle. Barrett's rifle roared, his size and strength cutting a path through the enemy line. He saw Loma fall, shot through the shoulder, and dragged him to cover before firing again. Tahan's voice echoed through the noise, steady and commanding, rallying his warriors like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Naya moved between the fallen, fearless, binding wounds as bullets tore the earth around her. When Barrett saw a slaver aiming at her from the ridge, he turned, fired, and dropped the man where he stood. Then another bullet found Barrett's side, grazing deep. He staggered but didn't fall. Pain only reminded him he was still alive. He pressed forward, pushing the last of the riders back toward the river. The slavers, seeing their leader dead, broke and fled into the brush. The sound of retreat replaced the gunfire, the silence deafening in its relief. Barrett sank to one knee, blood soaking his shirt, breathing hard. Naya ran to him, falling beside him in the dust. "You're hurt," she said, voice breaking. "I've been worse," he rasped. But she didn't smile this time. Tahan rode up, dismounted, and placed a hand on Barrett's shoulder. "Today the tribe calls you brother," he said. Barrett looked up at him, half smiling through the pain. "Brother's fine," he murmured. "Just don't make me dance." The chief laughed, a sound that cut through the smoke like sunlight through storm clouds. The war was over. By evening, the valley had gone quiet again. The smoke drifted in thin silver ribbons toward the sky, carrying with it the memory of every shout, every shot, every heartbeat that refused to quit. Barrett sat near the river, his side bandaged, his hat resting beside him, the beaded necklace still hanging against his chest. The water ran red for a while, then clear again, as if the land itself had chosen to forgive. Naya approached with 2 cups of broth, her steps soft on the wet earth. "You should be resting," she said, lowering herself beside him. "Tried that," he answered with a faint smile. "Didn't take." She handed him the cup, her eyes shining in the firelight. "The tribe is singing tonight," she said. "My father says it's not a song for war, but for peace, for what was lost and found again." Barrett nodded, his voice low. "Guess that's worth singing about." She looked at him a long moment, then said, "When they tell this story, they'll say the giant cowboy came from the hills to fight for a people not his own." He chuckled softly. "Long as they tell it right, that the people fought for me too." The sound of drums rose from the camp, slow and steady like a heartbeat made of earth and smoke. Children ran past carrying torches, their laughter mixing with the wind. Chief Tahan walked toward them, his shadow long in the fading light. "The council has spoken," he said. "You may stay among us, or ride where your heart leads. Either way, you carry our name now." Barrett stood, steadying himself. "Ain't many places I ever fit," he said, "but this one's close." Tahan smiled and clasped his hand. "Then you have found home." As the chief left, Naya turned to him. "And if you ride away?" she asked softly. "Then I'll come back when the snow melts," he said. Seems I owe this valley a spring." She reached up, brushing the dirt from his sleeve, her touch gentle as the river breeze. "Then I'll wait for it." Barrett looked out over the camp where the fires glowed against the night, where peace, fragile and hard-earned, finally settled. The world still held its cruelties, but for once he didn't feel alone in it. He tipped his hat, eyes glinting under the stars. Maybe mercy's the only thing worth fighting for after all. If this story touched your heart, where mercy meets courage under the crimson sky, there's another waiting for you on Crimson West, where every act of kindness writes the next legend.